In today's video, we're going to build a simple CRUD app. We're going to build an app to track time and log time on various projects. You could have different accounts or clients that you're working for, track a number of hours that you are working on various days, add some descriptions. Really just a simple app to demonstrate what we can do with the latest in Next.js 13, server actions, etc. Speaking of, the technology we'll be using for this is Next.js. We're going to combine server components, client components, server actions for posting data back to the server without having to make API routes or have a GraphQL layer or anything like that. We'll use Prisma, of course, for our database ORM. I'm also going to use Prisma for migrations. If you've watched my channel for a while, you know I've been a big fan of connects for database migrations, but we're going to use Prisma Migrate in this, and specifically just their DB push feature to do some rapid prototyping on this little CRUD app. And then finally, of course, everyone's favorite database, Postgres, to back that up, and we'll get that running inside of Docker. So the point of this is to start from absolute scratch and get to a simple working CRUD app along the way. So let's dive right in. Let's start off by bootstrapping our Next.js app. So I'm going to run a pnpx, create next app at latest, and I'm going to call this time CRUD demo. So yes to TypeScript, yes to ESLint, yes to Tailwind, of course, though I'm no expert yet. Source directory, definitely app router, no more customization, and we'll get this going and open this in VS Code. Now let's start this project just to make sure it boots. And it does. Great. Our next step is to add Prisma and get our data model going. So I'm going to come back to a terminal here. I'm going to run pnpx prisma init. And that will initialize some Prisma things for us. First, we have this Prisma directory with our schema. We also have an environment variable file that is created for us with a database URL. Now, to make this very easy on ourselves, we're going to run our database in Docker. To get our database running in Docker, let me add a database docker compose.yaml file so that we can get that going. So this is a pretty straightforward Docker Compose configuration here. We're just going to run Postgres in Docker. I'm not going to try to run Next or anything like that. So we're going to pull the latest in Postgres. We're going to expose the Postgres port to our local machine so we can connect to it from Next running locally. We've selected a username and password, just simply Postgres, and I'm going to call this demo_dev. Time demo_dev. And then we are going to have a volume here so that our database data can persist between boots of Docker. Okay, so I should be able to do a Docker compose up now, and that will likely download the most recent Postgres and get the database going. Excellent, our database is running and ready to accept connections. Now I can move along on our data model. So let's open up our schema.prisma file and work on our data model. Now what we're going to do is define our data model in here and then use the Prisma migrate feature to kind of like force push this into our local database without even needing to deal with migrations just for this demo. So I'm going to create two models here. One is going to be called account, and an account is going to be, think of it like a client that you're doing a project for. So this will be a parent model to some like time entries that we're going to have. So I'm going to use Copilot here to get us started. So we are going to do an ID of a string. This will be the ID field, and we're going to do a CUID in Prisma, which is kind of like a UUID, but it's a bit shorter and I don't know, looks a little friendlier. I'm going to put my timestamps at the bottom, and we're going to have a name on the account, and that's going to be required, and really that's all we need. So we have an ID and a name field. Now let's create, what should we call this? Let's say a work session model. So for this, we want to track for a given date. Let's have a description of work that we're doing and number of hours of work that we completed. So again, because this is a time tracking app, now we have accounts that we're doing work for and work sessions, which tracks our work on each day. So again, I'm going to have an ID field. Don't need a name, but I would like a description. I'm going to make this nullable so that we can save entries from the interface, even if not everything is filled out. I'm going to have a starts on field that is a date time. So we have a date, a description, and this work session needs to belong to a specific account. So I'm going to have an account ID, which is a string that will be required, and it does reference an account here. And I'm also going to make this starts on nullable as well, so that again, these entries can be built up in the UI without all of the information being required. So I'm just going to clean this up here. We have work sessions. I like those to be plural. And I am going to map these to specific table names. So I'm going to map that to accounts and map this to work sessions. Because we're going to use this Prisma file for actually creating the tables, indexes, things like that, let's run back through this data model and make sure that we've selected all the right data types and add some indexes as well. So up here on name of account, let's set some sort of like varchar here of, let's say 40 characters. And then for the description, let's also have a varchar here. Let's say this could be up to, I don't know, 120 characters. For the starts on, we want this to be a date. And then let's go ahead and add an index to this table. So anytime we're querying work sessions, it's likely going to be by an account ID, but not just by account. We're also going to order on the starts on column. So that'll be our date for each work session. So let me add a combined index here of account ID and starts on. One more thing while we're here, since the ID columns are string, let's go ahead and set a max length on those as well to 30, the IDs and the foreign keys. Okay, now we're ready to push this schema to our database and see if everything goes well. So let me open up my terminal, open up a new terminal, and I'm going to run a pnpx prisma db push. Oh, and this didn't work because I didn't update my database URL environment variable. Let's do that. So our database here is Postgres. The username is Postgres. The password is Postgres. Don't tell anyone. It's running locally at localhost 5432. The database is called something, time demo dev. And I never put schema in here. I just don't. So our database URL is up to date. Let's try db push again. And there we go. Our database is pushed to our local database. So we now have the tables and indexes and column types that we would expect. And it has also installed and generated our Prisma client for us based upon our Prisma schema. So we're looking good so far. Now I can get to creating our actual pages. And I think we'll do a simple two-column layout here where the left column is a list of accounts acting as a navigation for us. And the right main body of the page are the time entries for our projects. We're going to be using Next.js app router for this. So let's go in here and create our first route. Under our source and app directory, I'm going to create a new file. And I want to call this accounts/ and we're going to have an ID parameter here, and then /page.tsx. On this accounts page, so this will be our account detail page. So we've already clicked on an account in the left-hand side. So let me just go ahead, create a basic React component here. So this is going to be our account detail page. Now we can only get to this account's detail page if we actually already have an account. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to our root page here and really just delete everything that comes in the default root page and just say hello world. Okay, let's take a look at our next app. Whew, that is a lot of gradients. I have this hello world page. I'm not going to be able to live with these gradients. So let me go to globals.css here, and we've got to get rid of these gradients before we can move on with our lives. Okay, whew, we can all breathe. So in our root layout, let's build up our left bar for our accounts listing. So under body, let's create just a simple div. Now I am no Tailwind expert here. I'm sure there are many of you out there that could run circles around me with Tailwind. So this is, just to warn you, this is not a Tailwind tutorial. But we're going to do our best here. So we have I want this to be background of slate. I'm going to make this 800. Our text is going to be slate. Let's start with 100 and go from there. Okay, we're going to have our accounts list in here. So up in our layout, this is actually going to be an async function because what we can do is pull in from our database. Now, in order to pull in from our database, we need some sort of database client. So in source, I'm going to create a new file called modules/db.ts. And in this, I'm going to create a database variable that we will export. And this is going to be a new Prisma client, I believe. Excellent. So up in our React component, I'm going to make an accounts variable where we will await from our database account.findMany, and we will order this by name, of course, ascending. Which leads me to believe now that we're going to have a very tiny database here, but what you'd really want to do if you're ordering by something this frequently is index it. So while we're here, just for good measure, up in our accounts table, we will add an index on name. Okay, so we're ordering by name ascending. We're getting a list of accounts. We're going to map through this list of accounts. Let's go ahead and only select what we need. We always need an ID, and we'll select the name as well. So we'll create a link from Next.link. The href will be account/account ID. We'll have a key since we're mapping through this. I usually like to put my key at the beginning. And then this will be account name. Like so. Okay, one more parenthesis to close this off. And let's go ahead and set the width on our left nav here of, say, let's see what 240 pixels looks like. Okay, we've saved this off. We're refreshing. We don't see anything yet, but let's test that out. Yes, so we just didn't have any content there because, of course, we don't have any accounts yet. Well, let's make our body we've got enter class name here, but we also want some other things because I'm going to make this a flexbox. I want the height to be screen. Okay, looking closer. I think we can remove test. Okay, excellent. Now that we have our accounts list, I'm going to add in a component here that will end up being a client component that will start as a button that we can click on, new client component. It'll turn into an input field, and that's where we can get into React server actions to handle the posting of that input field to create a new client or a new account in our database. So let's walk through that now. I'm going to call this component new account creator, something like that. And in my source directory, create a new file in components/new account creator.tsx. And let's stub out a component here. And let's call this from our other file. In this component, I want to have a button, and I want to have this say plus new account. When we press this button, I want this to turn into an input field. So let's have some state here. So I'm going to say edit mode, set edit mode, use state. I don't like calling React dot. If this is edit mode, then we'll return this button. If it's not edit mode, then we'll return a form that has an input and a create button. Let's also do a cancel button that turns this edit mode back into false. Now, because we're using useState, this needs to be a client component, because this, anytime you're using useState, it can only be run on the client. It can't be run on the server. Now, even though we're not really focusing on building a sexy UI here, I do want this to look a little nice. So let's pull in our shadcn components. Now, if you're not familiar with shadcn UI, it's this really awesome component library. The guy behind it, shadcn, was actually hired by Vercel, which is the company behind Next.js. So you know that it is well supported. If I go on over to the input documentation, you can see how to install that here. Now, I have not actually initialized shadcn, so let's do that now in this repository. Let's do pnpx shadcn UI at latest init. Yes, we'll use Typescript. We'll use the default styles. Slate is fine. Our CSS files in source/app.globals.css. Yes, variables is good. Our Tailwind file is Typescript. Tailwind.config.ts. Components is fine. Utils is fine. Server components, yes. Components JSON. Excellent. So now shadcn UI is initialized for us. Let's go in here and add input, as well as let's go ahead and add button. Now that we have those installed, I can replace our just plain old HTML inputs and buttons with the shadcn variants of them. Okay, now it looks a little bit nicer. I want to add some space in between all of these. So on the form, I'm going to say class name, flex and flex wrap, and I'm going to add a small gap between all the items. So we have a little bit of a gap here. Okay, so let's say someone types in a name here. Let's say client A. Now, on our input, let's do a class name. Let's do text slate 800. That's better, maybe 900. If I hit create, nothing happens. This form needs to post somewhere. So to make all this work and be able to create this account, let's create our first server action. Now, server action is a nice fancy sounding name. It's really just a function that accepts data from a form. You can put server actions in two different places. One is within a React component itself, though it has to be a server component, or you can put it in a separate file. So I'm going to create a separate file here. In source, I'm just going to create an actions file. So we'll call this actions.ts, and we'll just layer this up here. In this actions.ts file, I'm going to create a create account, if I can spell, create account function. This is going to take some data, which is of type form data. That's what Next.js is going to provide us. And we'll define this function. Now, form data is a special type of object. It is not like a regular object where you can just get the keys. We need to call a function off of this. And we want this data to be of a very specific shape. In our case, it's just a simple name. And I have added, by the way, a name attribute on this input field. So let's pull in a library called Zod to help us with validation of our data. We'll run a pnpm add Zod. So let's create a create account schema, which will be a Z from Zod. Z from Zod. Import Z from Zod. Thank you. Object, and the only thing that we need on this is a name. Thank you, Copilot, for suggesting that we have a minimum and maximum here. That is a great idea. In fact, let's go to our Prisma file, and we made our names a max of 40. So I'm going to say max of 40, and we'll say a minimum of 1 is fine. I mean, what if you're doing work for X? It's just X. Okay, so we have our create account schema. Let's take our data, and actually I'm going to call this raw data. So then our new variable can be just simply data that is parsing our raw data. But we do need to kind of transform this a bit. I'm thinking there's probably a better way to do this, but I'm just going to manually create an object with a name key and get the name key off of the form data object, because .get is how you get things out of form data. Okay, now we have our data. It for sure has a string. It has been validated. Let us insert this into our database using Prisma. So let's say we're creating an account. We're going to await from our database account.create. Our data is just our data object, and that's what we have. Now this needs to be an async function, of course. All right, we've got our account. It's declared, but it's never read. Okay, now we can use a next navigation function called redirect to redirect to this account/account ID. So when this form is filled out, we've got our input, we've got a form, someone clicks create, then it goes to this server action, adds it to the database, and redirects the user to account. Now, in order to use this server action, let's export this function. Down on form, we'll say action equals create account from our actions file. So if I save all of this and I come over here and I say account name is, who are we doing work for? I probably don't need to say any actual brand name, so we'll just say client A. Okay, client A. It did nothing. Okay, what's going on here? You know what's going on? I have not enabled server actions. As of this recording, server actions is still in experimental mode. You might want to check with the docs to see if it is when you're watching this. But what we need to do is go into next config, and under our next config, under experimental, let's add server actions true. With this, let's also go ahead and restart our server. Okay, now that we have this enabled, let's try our form again. If I refresh here, if I refresh, it's ugly. If I refresh again, there we go. If I refresh here, let's try client A, hit enter. Okay, now we have an error that we could do something with. Prisma client is unable to run in this browser environment. Okay. So what we're doing here is we need this to be a server action, and in our actions file, much like for client components, we have this use client string at the top. We need to put a use server string at the top of our actions file. That will tell Next.js that these functions are designed to be server actions. So let's give this yet another try, and maybe the 3rd or 10th time here will be the charm. Okay, yes. All right, so a few different things happened here. I hit create. We do have client A up here. Excellent. That means within our layout file, we are actually getting an account that's being looped through here and added to our navigation. Our URL did change, which means up in our server action, this redirect did fire and we're being redirected to our URL. We're getting a 404 on this page could not be found. That's okay, we're going to work through that. All right, I'm wanting this form to go away after we create an account here. And I've noticed I have my flag flipped here. So I'm saying if edit mode, then display this button. Actually, what I want, if it's not edit mode, to display this button. And now we have an issue with our CSS. So in our layout, we're looping through accounts here, but I want them to be displayed in a column. So I'm going to adjust this div to be a flexbox of flex column. And now things are kind of in a column. So I want to left align the text in this button. So we're going to do class name text left. It doesn't like me. I'm doing it on the wrong button. Class name text left. There we go. Now things need space. So I'm going to say gap of 1, maybe 4. Excellent. Let's make one more for good measure. Good try. So our new account creator, we're not flipping between modes. So let me do an on click, and on our click, we're going to set edit mode to true. If I click new account, then we go into edit mode here where we can type in an account name, client B. Now on submit, I do want to set edit mode to false. So let's see if there's any issue with this having both an action, which is a server action, and an on submit handler, which handles some local changes. So I'm going to click create here, and that did work just fine. So we've got client A, client B, it redirected us, and it changed our local state here. Okay, now that we can create clients, we've got our left nav going over here, and we have our first server action demonstrating the difference between client components and calling server actions, managing client state, etc. Let's work on our body of our view over here, where we can add a table of time log entries. Let's go in here and look at our directory structure. So right now we have app/account/ID, which is good. We've got page. Now I would expect this, as it stands right now, to be demonstrating this page, but I can see that the URL we've been redirected to is account, not accounts. So let's fix our server action to redirect us to a plural directory. And we're just going to change our directory here. And now we can see our account detail page component. So let's build up a little bit of an account detail page here. The first thing is we need to bring in our params. So let's give a type to these params, which is an ID of string. And because this is a server component, notice that we don't have use client anywhere. I can call my database right from here. So let's get our account from our database based upon account.find unique or throw, which means I just want to like completely error out if it can't be found. We're going to find the account based upon the ID, and we're going to select the ID of the account and the name. This is await, so I need to make this an async function. And let's make this div an h1 where we are displaying the name. Then we can see the name of the account, client B. We can see by clicking on the left navigation over here, we can navigate between different clients or different accounts, I should say, and it does change our URL. Now let's build up a table of our work sessions where we can document all of this great work that we're doing. For this, I'm going to pull in a shadcn table just to make our table look a little bit nicer here. So let's install the shadcn table into our repo with a pnpx shadcn UI latest add table. I'm going to go over here and copy a basic example from the documentation and paste it into our page. Okay, let's fix this up a bit. And let's import all these Shadcyan table components. I'm not going to use caption. Okay, if I save this, we can see our table here. I'd like this table to be full width. And what's actually happening here is the body, the right-hand side of this page, is not full width due to a higher level flexbox. So I'm going to go over into my root layout and make sure that the children, that this page is taking up the full width here. So I'm going to say class name flex of 1. So this white area will grow, flex of 1, grow to the full width here. Let's now edit our table down into our case. If I refer back to my Prisma data structure here, this table is essentially going to be a table of work sessions, which is some work that we did on a day for a number of hours. Now that I am saying that out loud, we don't have our number of hours on here. So let's add that in. But what I want is a date field, a description field, and then an hours field that is nullable. Since we've added a column here, let me run pnpx prisma db push to make sure that we have that hours column in our database. Okay, so let's go and edit our table. So the first column is going to be date. The second column is going to be description. And I'm going to delete that column. And then the last column is going to be hours. So we have a date, a description, and hours. Since we're in a server component here, we can loop through all of the work sessions from this account and render them right here on the screen. So we're already pulling the account from our database. I can go ahead and in this same query, pull in our work sessions. So let's say that I want to get my work sessions, and let's select only what we need. So let's select our ID, description, date is called starts on, hours it's saying doesn't exist, but that may be because I need to regenerate my Prisma client. So let's run pnpx prisma generate, and that will likely solve that issue. And let's go ahead and order by starts on descending for our table. Down here in our rows, we can loop through our account.worksessions, and I'm just going to simply call this session. And loop through our rows here. So let's add a key. Anytime you do a map, you need a key. So let's say session.id. We are getting some red squigglies here. So I wonder if I need to reload Typescript because our Prisma types have changed. It looks like that fixed it. So sometimes when you regenerate your Prisma client, you do need to restart your TypeScript server so they can pick up those new types. Okay, missing a parenthesis. Let's come in here, do a session.startsOn. Now this is not going to be a very pretty date to date string. But if we need to, we can pull in the Luxon library, which we probably will. Okay, then we'll do session.description. Then we'll do a session.hours. And we're probably going to want to end up doing some rounding or whatnot there, but we'll see once we get some data in. Okay, we of course don't have any data in our database for this. While I'm here, let me go ahead and add in some padding on this screen because this is driving me bonkers. There we go. This account name is not very large. Let's go ahead and do this too. Let's make this text large. And let's say margin bottom of quite a bit. Do a font bold. There we go. Now we want to add some hours here. And I'm trying to think how we'd like to do this. I think what I'd want to do is have a row at the top with a button in it. that we could click to add some hours. In order to add time to our work sessions here, let's create a row at the top that will be a set of fields that we can enter in to create a new work session. So before we loop through all of the work sessions here, let's add another row that will essentially be our form. So we don't need a key. Our date is now going to be an input field. We'll pull in our input class from shadcn. Our description will also be an input field. And the name of this we'll say is description. In fact, while we're here, let's make sure that we do a name of starts on for our date. And then finally, let's do a input of type number, name of that hours, and there we go. So now we have different inputs here. Also, I want to go ahead and maybe reduce the width of our hours column. Ooh, that is very small. Great. And let's add a fourth column for any sort of actions that we have. So I'm just going to leave the header empty, but I'm going to have a cell with a button. I'm going to make this, of course, a shadcn button. Up in our new work session row here, since we have a collection of inputs and a button, I need to wrap this in a form so that we can post this to a server action. However, we have a big issue there. So let me take this row, let me show you. Let me take this row and wrap this in a form element. And we're not going to do anything besides that. And if I save this, our whole row goes away. Well, if I open up the console here, you can see that we've got an invalid DOM nesting. TR cannot appear as a child of form. So I can't, in the middle of a declaration of a table here, and not just a shadcn table, I'm talking like just a plain old HTML table. While we're defining a table tag,thead, tr, body, all that sort of thing, we can't have a form wrapping a row. A tr has to be a direct descendant of tbody, which is a direct descendant of table. So I can't really wrap each row inside of a form. Because of that, what I think we're going to do here is break out of true HTML tables and move to Flexbox. So let's convert this quickly to Flexbox and our own kind of notion of a table. So I'm going to change everything to a div, essentially, and then apply some classes to mimic the visuals of a table. So this is going to be flex. In order to get things sized and aligned appropriately between all of our columns, I'm going to specify a flex basis value using Tailwind here and align things that way. So in our date column, I'm going to say that this is a flex of 1. In our description column, I'm going to say that this is a flex of, we'll try 3. And then in our hours column, a flex of 1. And finally, our actions column, also a flex of 1. And I'll apply this down the page to see things align. So I tried to align things here with flex, and I wanted to be sure and put this in the recording. Flex 3 does not exist in Tailwind. Again, like I said at the top, I'm no Tailwind expert here. But Flex 1 does, and I expected Flex 3 to be a Flex 3, but that does not exist. So there is a way to do an arbitrary value, and this is unlike other Tailwind arbitrary values, so I thought it would be interesting to put this in. So a flex you can do is the square bracket arbitrary value. And then with underscores, be able to specify the grow, shrink, and basis value. So let's copy this format and see if we can make this work for our needs. So instead of flex 3, we're going to do a flex 3, 0%. And this is more of what I expected, to where date hours and our action column all have a ratio of 1, and our description column has a ratio of 3. So that's good. I leave it to the Tailwind experts out there to come up with putting this in the configuration and maybe making this a little less arbitrary in our code. But let's move on with our table here, or our table. So now that we can put a form around our input row, we can create a server action that takes this input and inserts a record into our database. So in our actions file, let's create an action for this. So we already have a create account action. Let's similarly export const create work session action that will be an async of form data, of course, and we'll process it from there. Let's also create a XOD schema, because this is going to be a little bit more complex than our account creation schema. So let's say we have a create account schema. Let's do create work session schema, which is a XOD object. Now there are some things that we want to restrict and make optional on here. So the first thing is account ID, and we do want this to be a string, and it is required. The next thing is description. Let's pop open our Prisma file again, and remember our description is up to 120 characters long. So this is a min of 1, a max of 120, and this is actually optional, so that's fine. Duration, which we named ours hours, so let's name ours hours here. This is a min of 0 and a max of, I guess you could say 24 in a day. This is float a thing on here? No, just a number. Okay, number, and this is also optional. Nearly everything here is optional in work session because I want to allow the user to be able to put in partial data and fix that later. And finally, what are we missing? We're missing a date. So let's have a starts on field, which is a date, which is optional. Okay, so essentially everything is optional except for account ID, and that is required here. So let's create a const, which is our data, which parses all of these things off of our form data value. Let us do create a work session here. As Copilot has so kindly done for us. But we're not going to redirect. What we're going to do instead is we essentially want to refresh the page, as you might say, but we really just want to refresh the data on it. So Next has this really awesome function called revalidate path. Does it come from Next cache? I guess it comes from Next cache. And we want to revalidate the path at accounts/account ID. And that will revalidate this page and refetch the data for us almost magically. So let's save our actions file. Go back to our page. In the form, we're going to say our action is create work session. Save this. And let's see what happens when we add our first work session. So we have our date. Let's go ahead and pick, today is October 14th when I'm recording this. Our description is record video. Let's say this has been 2.5 hours. Hit add. Please enter a valid value. The number input isn't letting me put in a float here. So in our input field, let's add a step attribute, which allows us to step at an interval of, say, a quarter hour. I think that should work. Okay, making progress. So I've submitted these values and we got some errors here. For account ID, it expected a string and received null. Well, that's because we weren't passing an account ID. So I need to put a hidden field in here, which passes the account ID into our form. Let's just go ahead and do that now. So input of type hidden, and we're going to pass in the account ID. Oops, and I hit save. Okay, one moment. Let's put this back in. Okay, we fixed our account ID, but for the date, it expected a date and received a string, And even for the number, for hours, it expected a number and received a string. Well, that's because with form data, pretty much everything comes back as a string. We're not going to get actual date objects and actual number objects. There is a handy thing on Zod called coerce, and it allows us to coerce strings into various counterparts. So we can see that we can coerce a string into a date and also a number. So let's adjust our Zod schema in order to do just that. So the starts on date, let us coerce into a date. And for the number, for hours, let us coerce that as well. So let's save and retry our input here. Aha! Yes. We got our first record created in our database. We can see it revalidated our path, refetched the data forth, and is displaying it almost nicely, kind of nicely, not nicely at all, onto our page here in our table. Now, there are several things I'd like to do to clean this up, just kind of styling-wise, etc. But we're making some good progress here. Let's start with the input row and clearing out these fields upon submission. In order to do that, I'm going to take out this form section and extract this into its own component, which will become a client component. So let's call this new work session row. Create a new file in components called new work session row.tsx. Stub out a component, new work session row. Paste this in. And import the things we need to import here. So we need to import our create work session server action. We need to import input here. And we need to import button. The other thing we need is an account ID. So we need to make account a prop where it contains at minimum an ID of string. So back on our page, we need to take our new work session row and pass in our account. If I save all of this, then it doesn't work. If I save all of this and import the component, then it does work. Let's make our input row here when we're creating a work session automatically clear out the values whenever we hit add or press enter. For that, I think the easiest way to do that will be to reset this form element after we perform our action. So I'm going to add a ref here, and we'll call this form ref. And then we'll create a form ref from use ref up above. Now we did need to make this a client component, of course, because you can only use ref on the client. So now whenever we perform this action, after the action's done, I want to clear out the values. Now one hypothesis could be that you could add an onSubmit handler. However, this onSubmit handler runs before the action runs. So we don't want to reset the values before they're sent to the server. We want to reset them after they're sent to the server. So we can do this by wrapping this action in another function. So let's create a variable called handle action. And it will have the same signature, meaning that it accepts some sort of form data and does something with that. Now, this can even be an async function. So because this create work session is an async server action, we can go ahead and await that to be completed. And after that, take our form ref, if the form still exists, and go ahead and reset it. So let's make handle action our action here and test this out. If we make a test description here, hit add, then that works. Now, outside of the recording here, I had to play around with our Zod types a little bit to make this work, and let me show you what happened. In our Zod schema, I had to add some pre-processing of our values. Before we did add some coercion to coercing a string into a date value for the starts on and a string into a number value for the hours. However, that didn't quite go far enough. Because this form should appropriately allow empty values in these inputs, those empty values still do get sent on to the server as empty strings. So they're not actually getting sent as a null or undefined, they're getting sent as empty strings. So I had to add what's called a Zod preprocessor to here to go ahead and nullify any empty strings. So if the value that we're getting is an empty string, count that as null. Otherwise, use the value that we got. So I'm having to pre-process this starts on and these hours and make sure all these fields are both marked optional and nullable. There may be a little bit better of a way to do this. If you have a better way to do this, please leave this in the comments below because I would love to know that answer. But for now, we are able to add partial data to rows, so we can go ahead and add a row without a date and without hours to allow the user to put in partial data here. Let's clean up our rows just a little bit and go ahead and add some edit and delete icons to each row. Over here in page, let's add a border bottom, border B, and change our color to a slate 200. And also, I'd like to add in a little padding here. So let's say a PY of 2, maybe 3. Into our rows. Let's add edit and delete buttons to our rows. So I'm going to use the shadcn button, which has a mode called, or a variant called ghost, where you can only see it on hover. Call this edit, but we're going to use an icon in here. So we have edit. Yes, that looks good. Let's use an icon. So let's pull in a pencil icon, which comes from the Lucid React library. That is already in here. I believe that installed along with shadcn UI. Giant icon. Okay, so let's set the size to, let's try, oh, that's too big. Let's set the size to 16. And then let's add a class name on the button to change the color. So let's say text slate 300 is going to be too light. We'll try a 500. We're going to do a similar thing for our trash can. So let's pull in a trash icon here. So now we have both a pencil and a trash icon for our edit and delete rows. And let's align our text to the right on our actions as well. So these are now right aligned. For our delete button, let's again create a server action to delete a work session. So I'm going to pull back up my actions here, add an action for delete work session. This will take a form data and delete our work session. Let's go ahead and create a Zod schema for this. So const delete work session schema. We're going to create a Zod object where the ID is a string, and honestly, that's all we need here. So let's pull out an ID from our delete work session dot parse and parse the raw data. Schema. Now we can delete this work session where ID equals ID. We do actually get the value of this session upon delete. So we can come in here and say session.account ID in our revalidate path. So let's export this delete work session server action and wrap this trash button in a form with an action of delete work session, like so. We will need the work session ID, so let's add our hidden element, which is that session ID. A form is causing a break here, so because a form is a block in HTML, so I'm going to create our actions as a flex row. Now, if I hit delete, that test row should go away. Excellent. Now, of course, as a reminder, In this simple app, we haven't done any sort of authentication or authorization. So in this case, in a production level application, you'd want to do some sort of authentication and authorization here. For instance, if you're deleting a work session, not simply just deleting it by ID, but making sure the current user actually has access to that work session in an account that they can see, and deleting it. Just wanted to mention that here because usually you don't want to blindly delete by ID. But for our simple CRUD app here, this will work fine. Okay, so far we've handled creating new records, both for clients or accounts and our work sessions. We've handled reading records, displaying those on the screen here. And we've handled deleting records, deleting our work sessions. So the final thing left is the update stage. What I want the user to be able to do is click on this pencil icon and have this row turn into much like our new work session row up here, where they are able to edit this work session's values. For that, I'm going to refactor the component that we have above for creating a new work session into a more generic work session form component that can handle both creates and updates. Let's go to our new work session row, and I'm going to rename this to work session form row. And let me rename the component, work session form row. In our work session form row, I do want to be able to accept an optional work session. So we're going to say work session is optional, but can be an ID string or null, starts on or null, or hours or null. And we're going to pull this into our prop here. So on our inputs, we'll have a default value, potentially, of work session.date, or starts on, description, or undefined, or hours. Okay, we have a syntax error. Here we go. Okay, so let's make sure our new row still works, and that does still work. So this edit button needs to adjust the state here. And anytime we're talking state, we're talking about a client component. So really this row here does become a client component. So I'm going to add a component in here that says work session row.tsx. Stub out a component, work session row, and pull in from our page this row that we're talking about. Now, this work session row needs to accept a session. It has an ID description, starts on, and hours. So let's pull in the session. The starts on is a date, actually. And import our components. Then let's go back to our page and add this here. Okay, one more item. We have a Copilot error. There we go. Now we're back to our rows. We're back to being able to delete. We're back to being able to create. All is good. Within our work session row, we can now track some state to switch this between an edit mode and a view mode. So let's track some state. So again, let's say edit mode, set edit mode. Let's use our use state hook, which means at the top, we need to declare this as a client component. If we are in edit mode, then let's bail early and return an edit mode row. So we'll return a work session form row instead, where we're passing in a session here. Now, looks like I named the prop work session. I guess let's simplify that here. So let's simplify work session to simply session. And then the same goes for here. And starts on the date. Okay, work session account is missing in work session form row. Let's see. Let's add in our account. And therefore, account needs to be passed in. Actually, what we could do, because we do for sure have a session here, is we could say account is session.account ID, as long as we are passing in that account ID here. That's ID. Okay, I think we have things hooked up here. Let's check this. Account ID is missing in this session. Okay, so when we are fetching our work sessions, we need to add an account ID here. There we go. All right, another quick test. We can still delete rows. We can still add rows. And if we hit edit here, it doesn't change. Well, that's because we need to handle this edit button. Okay, no more errors. Let's handle the edit button. So we have the pencil icon here. It is a button. We've got an edit mode. We've got some state. So on the click of this button, we can change this to edit mode. So if I click on edit, then this turns into an edit mode. Yes. Now, we've got some stacking here, some visuals. These could be cleaned up. But we do have an edit mode, and it did, in fact, change to our test 4. So in our form row, what I'd like to be able to do is cancel out of this. Okay, we do have a default value. This starts on a date. Okay, this needs to be toDate string. So let's come down here, and within our action row, let's say button is just of type button. So we added type button here so that if you click on cancel, it does not submit the form. Let's make this cancel button a secondary button. And let's select these in here. Now, for the cancel button, we don't want that to appear actually on our new work session row. So let us only, if we're passing in the session, and that is a value that we're getting, then let's display the cancel button. Otherwise, let's display nothing. So we're getting a bit jumbled up here. I think if my screen were a little bit larger, we'd be able to see that we do have a cancel on an existing work session, but not on a new work session. Let's clean the visuals up a bit. Okay, just a little bit nicer of styling. Still not production ready, but getting closer. Let's make this cancel button switch us back out of edit mode. So in the form row here, we've got a cancel button. Let's set up a prop to where a parent component could say on cancel click, they could handle some sort of function. So on cancel click, so the cancel button would have an on click handler to pass up an on cancel click. So in our work session row, when we're switching to form here, if the user clicks on cancel, then we can simply set the edit mode to false. So over here, if I click cancel, that now changes back and forth between edit mode without posting our changes. But we do have changes here. So let's create a server action that is, instead of create work session, it is update work session. It's going to be strikingly similar to what we have here with a few changes. I'm actually going to copy this create work session and paste it below to be update work session. We do have this create work session schema, and it's strikingly similar to what we're going to need for update with a few changes. Zod has some handy functions for extending and omitting values from another schema, so let's try that out here. Down in our update work session, let's create an update work session schema. But instead of creating a brand new one, I'm going to take our create account schema, extend it to add in an ID, and also omit the account ID. I use create account schema. This should be create work session schema. There we go. Okay, now we're going to use update work session, and this will simply be ID, starts on, description, hours, excellent. Work session is going to be update instead. We're going to update where ID equals data ID. And data, we want to omit the ID. So we're going to just say starts on, description, and hours here. After that, we will revalidate the account ID path from the work session. Okay, let's try this out and see if this works. Let's go back to our form. Now our form needs to decide whether or not we are creating or updating. And that's based upon whether or not a session is passed in here. So if we have a session, then we will be awaiting an update work session data. Otherwise, we'll be awaiting a create work session data. And we do need to make sure that we're passing an account ID. We also need to pass an ID if one is available. Okay, I think that's what we need for this. Let's try this out. So I have test 4 here. If I edit this and change this to test 5, I don't want this to say add, I want this to say save, but we'll fix that. It did end up saving that. Okay, great, making progress. So add, let's conditionally say that this is either save or add. And then also after this is done, after we've handled the action, let's simulate an on cancel click. So I'm going to wrap this up a bit here. Only if it's a create do I want to reset the form. If it's an update, I'm going to on cancel click. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to edit this to test 6, and it did in fact update to test 6. Let's see if I can come in here, add some dates to this. Let's say that this was October 13th. Well, that was already in there. October 12th. Let's say we did a prep for video, and let's say I did that for 1 hour, hit save. And here we have it. We have prep for video, 1 hour. Notice it swapped the order of these because it is, in fact, fetching these in the order that we'd like. And yeah, so that is editing. I should be able to even clear out hours here, I believe. And yes, it was able to clear out this hour. Now, I think that cleared out my date too for some reason. So the issue is when I go into edit mode, the date is not pre-selecting for me. So let's fix that. What happened is if I clicked on edit here, the date is not pre-populating to our date on the work session. It's just empty. If I inspect this, I can see that our default value is Wednesday, October 11th, 2023, which is not the best structured and systematic value. We need to be using an ISO date here. So I can do 2 ISO string here, but that's going to give me a full ISO string with time as well. So I'm going to quickly do a substring and just take the first 10 characters. If I refresh and if I look at edit mode, it does now pre-populate the date, so I can update the hours without clearing out this date. Now you may also notice that our dates are off by one. If I click on edit here, it is October 12th. If I click on save, we're displaying October 11th. Why is that? Now these values are actually stored as October 12th and October 14th in our database, but it's being displayed differently here. The reason is when the date gets pulled out of the database, processed by Prisma, inserted into a JavaScript date object, it is interpreting that as a UTC date. So because I am in the US and I am behind or ahead, whichever way, of the UTC time zone, the midnight time at the beginning of October 12th in UTC time is October 11th, where I currently am now. So we can see this demonstrated by if I go to the work session row screen, and instead of saying toDateString here, if I did a similar thing of toISOString, and then did a substring of that, 010, then you would see here that it is in fact the 12th and the 14th. It was the way that this string was being displayed. So again, you'd probably want to pull in the Luxon library, which is a really great, the Luxon.js library, which is a really great library for handling and formatting dates and times. I'll leave that to you for how you'd like to display it in your app. For me, this is good here. I can see that this is October 12th and October 14th. Well, there you have it, coders. We have a working CRUD application that allows us to navigate between different accounts. We can create new work session rows to document work done with a date, description, and hours. We can add those in. We can edit rows. We can delete rows. All of the actions are being handled by Next.js and React server actions. All of the re-rendering is being handled automatically by the revalidate paths or the redirect in one of our cases. And most of our components here are server components, and we're dipping down into client components where we're needing to use state, such as flip-flopping between edit modes and non-edit modes. This is all done in Next.js 13 with React server components, being able to query the database right inside of a server component, which is super awesome. We've got Prisma backing this with our Prisma schema, automatically creating the data in our database. By the way, if you're interested in how to launch a database like this to say Vercel, I have another video on how to use Prisma with Vercel as well. Well, I hope this is helpful. Hope you found it helpful. If you did, please do like and subscribe to my channel. I only see that 10% of you are subscribed actually. So that would really help me out if you found this helpful. Other than that, happy coding, and I hope to see you in the next video. Have a great one.